My sister called me the family failure in her wedding speech, and my father laughed the loudest. Beth stood beneath the chandeliers with a microphone in one hand and a champagne glass in the other. She looked beautiful. That made it worse. The room saw lace, candles, expensive flowers, and a glowing bride. I saw the smile she wore when she wanted damage to look like charm. I want to thank everyone who taught me what family really means, she said. Then she turned toward my table. Every family has one woman who calls herself responsible because she never built anything of her own, Beth said. One woman who turns every crisis into a performance, then expects gratitude because she happened to be nearby. A few guests laughed. Not everyone. Just enough. Enough for my face to burn. Enough for my hands to go cold. Enough for Beth to know she had permission to continue. She smiled wider. Claire has always been our family failure, she said. She shows up when nobody else wants the mess, then acts like cleaning it makes her noble. The room laughed again. My father laughed like he had been waiting all night for someone to say it out loud. He leaned back in his chair, lifted his glass, and said, loud enough for the nearest tables to hear, "Don't ruin your sister's big day." That hurt more than Beth's speech, because my father knew. He knew who answered the school calls when Beth disappeared. He knew who paid the utility bill when Mia's lights were about to be shut off. He knew who drove across town after midnight because Beth had cried into the phone and called it one little emergency. He knew who had raised Beth's daughter when Beth wanted the image of motherhood but not the work. And still, in front of 200 wedding guests, he chose the woman in the white dress and laughed at the woman who had kept her life from collapsing. I looked down the table at Mia, Beth's daughter, 17 years old now. Old enough to know a lie when it wore wedding silk. Old enough to understand exactly what her mother had just done. Mia did not cry. She did not defend me. She only moved her thumb once across her phone, opened a folder, and slid the screen toward me under the linen tablecloth. The folder was labeled for later. Inside were voice messages. Beth's voice. My father's voice. Years of them telling me to keep quiet, cover the bills, pick up the child, and make sure the family never looked as broken as it was. Then Mia leaned close and whispered, "I kept everything." That was the moment I stopped hearing the laughter. Beth had made the one mistake people like her always make. She had confused my silence with surrender, and before the wedding ended, the room that laughed at me would hear the truth from the child Beth forgot was listening. I had been useful to my family for so long that they forgot useful is not the same as loved. When Beth needed money, I was reliable. When Beth needed a ride, I was generous. When Beth needed someone to pick up Mia because a meeting had run late, a date had gone long, or a weekend had somehow become 3 nights, I was good with kids. But when I needed one person to say, "Claire kept this family standing," the room always went quiet. That was the family arrangement. Beth was the beautiful one. Beth was the dramatic one. Beth was the one people forgave because she cried well and photographed better. I was the steady one, the spare tire, the emergency contact, the woman everyone called when something broke, then ignored once the broken thing had been carried out of sight. Mia was 9, the first time Beth left her with me for what she called a weekend. It was not a weekend. It was 11 days. It was 2 calls from the school office. It was 1 utility notice taped to Beth's door. It was a landlord who sounded tired enough to cry when he told me the rent was already late again. It was a child standing in my kitchen with a backpack, a purple sweatshirt with a hole at the cuff, and the careful expression children wear when they have learned not to make adults feel guilty. "Mom said you would know what to do," Mia told me. I did know what to do. I made soup. I found clean sheets. I emailed the teacher. I signed the form Beth had forgotten. I answered the phone when Beth finally called and said she had just needed space, as if motherhood were a room she could step out of whenever the air felt too heavy. Then I opened my banking app and moved money I did not have. That was how it started. Not with a dramatic adoption, not with a courtroom, not with one clean decision everybody could name. The child I raised became mine in small emergencies. A school concert Beth missed because drinks after a meeting became a night she did not want to explain. A fever at 2 in the morning while Beth's phone went straight to voicemail. A dentist bill Beth cried over until I paid it. A field trip Mia almost missed because the form had been sitting in Beth's purse for 3 weeks. A winter coat, a laptop repair, a school photo envelope, a rent notice, a grocery run, a text from Mia that said, "Can I stay with you tonight?" followed immediately by, "Please don't tell Mom I asked." I became the place the problem landed. Beth became the woman who looked grateful just long enough for people to stop asking questions. My father called it family. "Your sister gets overwhelmed," he would say. "Beth is under pressure. Don't make this bigger than it needs to be." He said those things with the easy authority of a man who had never had to absorb the consequences of his own excuses. He liked Beth's version of the family better than mine because hers cost him nothing. Beth cried. I handled things. Dad praised patience. The family stayed presentable. That was the machine. And for years, I kept it running because Mia was still inside it. Children should not have to live inside an adult's lie. So I covered the lie. I covered the rent gaps. I covered the school fees. I covered the bounce checks Beth called timing issues. I covered the birthday parties Beth planned for Instagram and left me to pay for afterward. I covered the hotel deposit for the wedding when Beth said the venue had made a mistake and her card was temporarily blocked. I covered so much that eventually my family stopped seeing the coverage and started seeing me as the floor. People do not thank the floor for holding them up. They only complain when it creaks. Mia noticed before anyone else did. That was the part Beth never understood. Children who are used as props learn to study rooms. They learn which adult is about to lie. They learn which smile means danger. They learn when gratitude is being demanded from them before they are old enough to understand what the debt is supposed to be. At 12, Mia already knew to bring her homework to my apartment on Fridays because there was a decent chance Beth would call at 6 and say she needed one more night. At 13, she knew not to ask her mother why there was never enough money for school fees, but always enough for new shoes before a charity lunch. At 14, she stopped pretending she believed every story. At 15, she started calling me when she needed the truth. "Aunt Claire," she said once, standing in my kitchen with her phone pressed against her chest, "is it bad that I feel calmer here?" "No," I said. I wanted to add a dozen things. I wanted to say her mother loved her in the way Beth knew how, which was not enough. I wanted to say adults can be broken and selfish and still expect children to protect them from the obvious. I wanted to say I was sorry she had to learn the difference between a mother who appears and a mother who performs. Instead, I gave her the cleanest truth I could. It is not bad to feel safe where someone is being consistent with you. Mia looked at me for a long time. Then she nodded. That was the night she started staying over even when there was no crisis. We built a rhythm Beth later pretended had never existed. Homework at the small table by my window. Pasta on Thursdays. Quiet drives after school, when Mia did not want advice yet, but did not want to be alone either. Grocery lists written by hand, because I still liked paper. Movie nights where she fell asleep before the ending, because she was finally somewhere her body could rest. I never asked her to call me anything other than Claire. I never tried to replace Beth. That would have been another kind of theft. I only did the work in front of me. That is what my family later used against me. They said I liked being needed. They said I made myself central. They said I collected problems because I did not have a life of my own. That is how people justify taking from the dependable. They turn the taking into the dependable woman's personality. But Mia saw the receipts. She saw the school forms. She saw the empty fridge after Beth promised a grocery run and forgot. She saw me cancel meetings, dates, weekends, and sleep because someone had to be the adult in the room. By 16, she did not ask me whether Beth would change. She asked me why everyone else kept pretending she already had. I did not have a good answer. So I started keeping records. Not because I wanted revenge, because Beth had a gift for making the week disappear after it was over. She could rewrite a crisis before the dishes were dry. She could turn a missed payment into an accounting mix-up, a vanished weekend into exhaustion, a child left waiting into a misunderstanding. If I remembered it differently, I was dramatic. If I kept proof, I was bitter, so I kept proof quietly. Screenshots of transfers, receipts for school fees, texts from Beth asking me to handle one thing, voice messages where she forgot to sound polished. I told myself the records were only for me, a way to prove I had not hallucinated my own life. I did not know Mia had been keeping her own archive. I did not know the child I thought I was protecting had been protecting me too. Beth's wedding was exactly the kind of event she had always wanted: soft lighting, white flowers, champagne passed by waiters who looked like they had been chosen for symmetry, and a guest list full of people who liked the idea of family more than the work of it. The invitation called the evening intimate. There were 200 people there. Beth had married a man from a clean, wealthy family that liked charities, seaside houses, and photographs of women laughing near stone fountains. She wore a dress that probably cost more than Mia's first year of private school. My father walked her down the aisle with tears in his eyes, though I had never seen him cry over a single bill that arrived at my apartment because Beth had put me down as the backup contact. The room loved her. I understood why. Beth knew how to be lovable when the lights were kind. She touched old women on the arm. She thanked staff by name when important guests were watching. She talked about resilience in a way that made people believe she had overcome hardship instead of handing it to other women in private. Mia sat beside me at a side table, wearing a pale blue dress Beth had chosen because it looked good in the family photos. She looks happy, Mia said. She does, I said. Mia did not answer. There are silences children carry when they know happiness is being staged too close to a lie. Dinner passed without incident. The candles were low. The band was soft. The speeches began with the groom's brother telling a harmless story about college. Everyone laughed in the easy way people laugh when they are not yet being asked to choose a side. Then Beth stood. The room warmed around her immediately. She did not rush. That was one of her talents. Beth knew how to make cruelty feel ceremonial. She held the microphone close, tilted her head, and smiled at my father first. I want to thank the people who taught me what family really means, she said. My father lifted his glass. Beth turned toward me. That was when I knew. Before she said my name, I knew. Some instincts are not paranoia. They are history recognizing its own footsteps. Some women in this family spend their lives trying to look noble, Beth said. Some of us just get on with it. A few guests laughed, uncertain at first. Beth took that uncertainty and treated it as applause. Some of us build real lives, she continued, instead of turning every crisis into a performance. My father smiled. Beth looked directly at me. Claire has always been our family failure. The words landed softly because the room did not understand yet that it had just been made part of a wound. She is the one who shows up when no one else wants the mess, Beth said, and then expects gratitude for it. More laughter now, enough that one of the bridesmaids looked down at her plate and smiled because smiling was safer than deciding. Mia froze beside me. Beth lifted her glass higher. To family, she said. My father laughed. Then he leaned back, pleased with himself, and said, Don't ruin your sister's big day. I looked at him, not because I wanted protection. That was gone. I looked because I needed to see the choice on his face. He understood what Beth had done. He knew the joke was false. He knew I had been the one holding Beth's life together for years. And he still chose the pretty version. The whole room watched me decide whether to swallow it. That was what public humiliation really is. It is not only the insult, it is the moment after, when everyone waits to see if you will make their comfort more important than your own truth. For most of my life, I had. Then Mia slid her phone toward me under the table. The screen showed a folder. For later, I opened it. Beth's voice messages, my father's voice messages, dates, notes, transfers, screenshots, years of the truth, organized by a child who had learned that adults lie best when no one keeps the receipt. Mia leaned close. I kept everything, she whispered. I closed my hand around the phone. For the first time all night, I smiled, not for Beth, for the room she had just handed me. I left the table before dessert. Slowly, that mattered. A woman who rushes looks guilty to people already prepared to misunderstand her. A woman who screams gives liars the noise they need. So I stood with the same calm my family had mistaken for obedience, placed my napkin on the table, and walked toward the hallway. Mia followed. So did Beth. Of course she did. She found me near the mirrored corridor between the ballroom and the garden doors, where the music sounded softer and the laughter could still reach us in pieces. Her wedding smile was gone. In its place was the face she used when she had created a problem and wanted me to solve it without naming her as the cause. Claire, she said, lowering her voice, you do not have to make this ugly. There it was. Not I'm sorry, not I lied, not I humiliated you. Just another invitation to carry the damage somewhere private. We can fix this later, she said. Dad is stressed. The whole day has been overwhelming. If you bring up old things now, you will only look bitter. I looked at her white dress, at the pearls sewn into the bodice, at the tiny stain of red wine near the hem where someone had probably apologized to her, like it was a tragedy. You called me the family failure in front of the people who watched me raise your child. I said. Beth exhaled sharply. You are taking it the wrong way. I almost laughed. That sentence was older than both of us. You are taking it the wrong way. You are too sensitive. You know how she gets. Don't make this bigger than it is. Every family has a language for making a woman doubt the wound while she is still bleeding. I was joking, Beth said. The joke was not the problem. I told her. The joke was the disguise. Her is moved zu Milliard. That was when fear entered her face. Beth could lie to me with ease. She could lie to our father with practice. She could lie to a room full of guests because most people prefer a pretty version when they are full of champagne. But Mia was standing there now, holding the phone, and Beth knew exactly what she had told her daughter to delete. Give me that, Beth said. Mia did not move. Beth tried again, softer. Mia, sweetheart, this is adult business. Mia looked at her mother with a face so calm it made me ache. It became my business when you kept leaving me with her and telling everyone she needed to feel useful. Beth's mouth opened. Nothing came out. For 17 years, Beth had trusted the world to see Mia as proof that she was a mother. She had forgotten that children eventually become witnesses. I turned back toward the ballroom. Beth reached for my arm. I stepped away. You do not get to humiliate me in public, I said. Then ask me for privacy when the truth comes back. Her face hardened. If you do this tonight, you will ruin my wedding. No, I said. I am going to return your speech to the room you gave it to. Mia stood beside me. Beth looked smaller then, not because she had lost beauty. She was still beautiful. She had the dress, the flowers, the husband, the room. She had everything except control of the version. And that was the one thing she had always valued most. Before I went back inside, I needed to know what was in the folder. Mia and I stepped into a small side room used for coats and gifts. Through the wall, I could hear the band begin another song. Somewhere beyond the door, Beth was probably searching for my father because Beth did not handle consequences alone. She recruited authority. Mia opened the folder. The first message was from Beth. Her voice came out of the speaker low and annoyed. Claire, I need you to keep Mia tonight. I cannot deal with this right now. Do not tell Dad. He will make it a whole thing. Mia did not blink. The second message played before I could breathe. And do not mention the payment notice. I am handling it. Just tell them you wanted Mia to stay with you because you like having her around. It sounds better. It sounds better. That was Beth in 3 words. Not better for Mia. Not better for the truth. Better for the story. There were dozens of files. Some from Beth. Some from my father. Some Mia had received by accident. Some she had saved from phones Beth forgot she had synced. One folder was labeled school. Another was labeled money. Another was labeled things Mom says not to tell. That one made my stomach turn. Mia clicked the father folder. His voice filled the little room. Keep this quiet, Claire. Your sister does not need another scandal before the wedding. I had heard him say versions of that line for years. Hearing the exact words made something final settle in me. Then another file played. Do not make me choose between you and your sister. I closed my eyes, because that was the truth, finally stripped of the family polish. He had been choosing for years. He chose Beth every time her image needed protecting. He chose Beth every time my exhaustion was more convenient than her accountability. He chose Beth every time he called my labor support and her neglect pressure. The difference was that now his choice had a voice. Mia hesitated over the last file. This one is not from Mom. She said, who is it from? Her old assistant. The assistant had quit 2 years earlier after Beth blamed her for missing invoices that Beth herself had ignored. Mia pressed play. A woman's voice came through, tired but steady. I am sending this because I do not want to be part of the next lie. I watched Claire handle the invoices. I watched Claire pick up Mia. I watched Claire pretend not to know she was covering for Beth again. If anyone ever says Claire was never there, that is a lie. I sat down on the edge of a velvet bench because my knees did not trust the rest of me. I had never been alone in the truth. That was the part one had not known. Women had seen. Staff had seen. Mia had seen. Even my father had seen, though he had chosen to use sight as strategy instead of conscience. For years, I had thought the danger was that no one knew. Now, I understood the worst truth. Many people knew. They were waiting to see whether I would make the knowing expensive. Mia sa decideme. I saved them because she kept saying you were making it up. She said. Her voice was small, but the sentence was not. She said you liked acting like my mother. She said you needed something to do because you were lonely. I felt that sentence hit places Beth had already bruised. Mia looked ashamed, though she had done nothing wrong. I didn't believe her, she said, not after a while. I reached for her hand. You should never have had to keep proof against your own mother. I know, she said, but I did. Then she looked toward the ballroom door. And tonight, she called you a failure in front of everyone. The band stopped. Applause rose faintly from the ballroom. Beth's wedding was continuing as if she had not just opened the floor beneath herself. Mia squeezed my hand. They are all still in there, she said. I stood. Then that is where the truth goes. I did not ask for permission to take the microphone. That was important. Permission was how my family had kept me useful. Permission to speak. Permission to object. Permission to stop giving. Permission to say a wound was real only after everyone else had agreed it was not too inconvenient to notice. I walked past the floral wall, past the head table, past a bridesmaid who saw my face, and stepped out of the way without asking why. The DJ looked confused when I approached. Give me 1 minute, I said. He handed me the microphone. People in rooms like that always hand over the microphone when a woman sounds calm enough to scare them. I stood where Beth had stood. The room turned slowly, table by table. My father sat upright. Beth stood beside him, her hand on his chair, still beautiful, still furious, still convinced beauty might function as evidence if she held still enough. Mia came to stand beside me. That changed the room before I said a word, because Mia was not supposed to choose a side. Children in families like ours are expected to be proof, not people. Beth wanted Mia as evidence of motherhood. Dad wanted Mia as evidence that the family had survived its rough patches. I wanted Mia to be free from evidence entirely, but she stood beside me anyway. My name is Claire, I said. It was a strange way to begin in a room full of family. That was why it worked. A few people stopped whispering. My sister just called me the family failure in her wedding speech. Beth laughed once. Sharp. Fake. Claire, please. I did not look at her, and my father laughed when she said it. Now I looked at him. The smile had left his face. I want to be very clear, I said. I am not here because my feelings were hurt by a joke. I am here because the joke was built on years of work this family has been happy to use and ashamed to name. The room quieted in layers. When Beth could not pay the school fees, I paid them. When Mia needed a place to sleep, I opened my door. When the rent notices came, when the electricity notices came, when the dentist bill arrived, when the teachers called, when the landlord called, when the collectors called, I answered. A woman at the nearest table looked from me to Beth. That was the first shift. Not outrage, attention. I did not do that because I was the family failure. I said, I did it because Mia was a child, and children should not be punished because adults prefer image to responsibility. Beth's husband looked at her, a tiny movement. Enough. Beth saw it too. Claire, she said, louder now. This is not appropriate. No, I said. What was not appropriate was turning the woman who protected your child into a punchline at your wedding. A sound moved through the room. It was not a gasp exactly. It was recognition arriving late. I lifted Mia's phone. Before anyone decides which version of me they want to believe, you should hear what Beth said when there was no microphone. Mia connected the phone to the speaker. Beth moved fast then. Turn that off. Mia looked at her. No, that one word landed harder than mine had, because it came from the child Beth had counted on controlling. Then Mia pressed play. Beth's voice filled the ballroom. Claire, I need you to keep Mia tonight. I cannot deal with this right now. Do not tell Dad. He will make it a whole thing. The room went still. The second clip followed. And do not mention the payment notice. I am handling it. Just tell them you wanted Mia to stay with you because you like having her around. It sounds better. It sounds better. This time, everyone heard it. The line did not sound tired now. It sounded calculated. Mia played the next file. Beth again. You always make me sound worse than I am. Just handle it, okay? I am trying to look normal for once. A bridesmaid covered her mouth. One of Beth's new in-laws lowered his eyes. My father stood halfway, then sat again when he realized standing would only make the room look at him sooner. But Mia had already opened his folder. His voice came next. Keep this quiet, Claire. Your sister does not need another scandal before the wedding. The room turned toward him. That was the first time all night my father looked old. Not tired. Old. Like a man who had just realized authority does not survive being played back to witnesses. Another clip followed. Do not make me choose between you and your sister. The silence after that was different. It did not belong to me anymore. It belonged to him. I looked at my father and said, you kept asking me not to make you choose. But you had already chosen. You chose Beth's image every time you asked me to clean up her life in private and disappear in public. He opened his mouth. No words came. Beth tried to smile again. It was painful to watch. Claire is emotional, she said to the room. She has always needed to feel important. Mia stepped closer to the microphone. The guests looked at her now, not as Beth's daughter, as a witness. She was important, Mia said. Beth's face changed. Mia held up her phone. She was there when you were not. The room broke open, not loudly. No one shouted. No one threw a glass. That only happens in stories people tell when they want pain to be simpler than it is. In real rooms, power begins to collapse when people start looking at the person they were told not to see. And now they were looking at Mia. My father finally stood. He did it the way men like him stand, when they believe height can replace truth. Enough, he said. I had waited my whole life to hear that word used in the right direction. He was using it at me. Sit down, Claire, he said. This is not the place. I almost smiled. He had sat comfortably through Beth's insult. He had laughed through the lie. He had let the room turn my years of work into a joke. But now, when the evidence arrived, suddenly the room had become sacred. It became the place when you laughed, I said. He blinked. That was the cleanest strike of the night. Not because it was cruel, because it was accurate. You knew I was raising Mia when Beth vanished, I said. You knew I was paying bills she could not pay. You knew I was handling the school calls, the doctors, the rent notices, the emergencies. You knew because I told you. My father gripped the back of his chair. And every time I told you, you asked me to keep it quiet because you did not want Beth embarrassed. Beth looked at him. For the first time all night, they did not look like allies. They looked like two people trapped inside the same exposed arrangement. You did not protect the family. I said, you protected the version of the family that made you comfortable. An older woman at the center table set down her glass. It made the smallest sound. In that room, it felt like a verdict. My father's voice dropped. Claire, you are hurting your sister. No, Mia said. Everyone turned. Mia had never spoken to my father that way. Not in public, not in private. Children raised near instability often become experts in softness because softness keeps adults calm. But she did not sound soft now. She is telling the truth. Mia said, that is different. My father looked wounded. That almost made me angrier. He was not hurt because he had failed a child. He was hurt because the child had stopped preserving his comfort. Mia, he said, you do not need to do this tonight. She looked at him with a steadiness I had waited 17 years to see. When did you think was the right time? No one breathed. That question did what my anger could not. It made his silence visible. For years, he had treated truth like a scheduling inconvenience. Not now, not tonight, not in front of people, not when Beth is fragile, not when Mia is young, not when the wedding is close, not when the family has finally found a little peace. There was always a reason truth had to wait. There was never a reason the woman carrying the lie got to rest. Mia's question took every postponed moment and placed it in front of him. He had no answer. Beth's husband pushed his chair back, slowly. Beth, he said, how much of this is true? Beth turned toward him. So quickly the veil of her performance slipped. This is not the time for that. He stared at her. The room heard the answer inside the non-answer. That was when Beth lost the wedding. Not the marriage. Not yet. Not publicly. But the wedding, as a performance, was finished because nobody was looking at her as the glowing bride anymore. They were looking at the woman whose own daughter had kept evidence. I took one breath and turned back to the microphone. I am done being the woman who cleans up after this family and gets called difficult for noticing the mess. I said, Beth was crying now, maybe because she was ashamed, maybe because she was cornered, maybe because tears had worked for her before, and her body reached for the old tool before her conscience did. I did not try to interpret them. I am done letting Beth turn my labor into her personality. I said. Then I looked at my sister. You can keep the wedding. I am keeping the truth. Beth flinched because she knew the room understood it. That was what proof did. It took a sentence she might have called dramatic and gave it furniture, dates, voices, and a child standing beside me. The joke had ended. The record had begun. After that, the room moved carefully. No one wanted to be the first person to applaud the truth at a wedding. No one wanted to be the first person to defend Beth either. That silence told me enough. A cousin near the back stood and left quietly. One of Beth's college friends stared into her lap. The groom's mother whispered something to her husband, who did not whisper back. My father remained standing, but the posture had left him. He looked like a man waiting for someone else to restore the old rules. No one did. Mia still held the phone. Her hand was shaking now. I put my hand over hers, not to stop her, only to let her know she was not standing there alone. Beth finally looked at her daughter. Mia, she said, softer than before. You do not understand how hard things were. Mia nodded once. I understand more than you think. Beth cried harder. I was trying. I know, Mia said. That surprised me. It surprised Beth too. Mia's voice stayed steady. But Aunt Claire was the one who showed up. There are sentences that do not sound dramatic when you write them down. In a room full of people who had laughed at the wrong woman, that sentence became a reversal. Not because it destroyed Beth, because it restored the correct name to the correct work. For years, Beth had stood in photographs as Mia's mother while I stood behind the camera, beside the car, at the school office, by the pharmacy counter, outside the apartment door with groceries in both hands. Mia had just moved me into the frame. My father lowered himself into his chair. That was the first honest thing he had done all night. Beth's husband did not go to her. Not immediately. He looked at Mia, then at me, then at the tables filled with guests who now understood they had been recruited into a cruelty they could no longer laugh away. "I need a minute," he said. Beth stared at him. "You are leaving me here?" He looked at the microphone in my hand. "I think you left a lot of people places," he said. It was not a grand line. It was not a cinematic collapse. It was quieter than that. But Beth heard it. So did everyone else. Consequences do not always arrive as punishment. Sometimes they arrive as people finally refusing to stand where you put them. Mia and I stepped away from the microphone. No final speech. No demand. No dramatic exit yet. The room had enough to carry. As we walked toward the doors, my father called my name. "Claire." I stopped, but I did not turn around. For a second, I hated myself for wanting him to say something useful. Some old hopes die loudly. Some die by waiting one final time. "I did what I thought was best," he said. There it was. The last refuge of people who do harm without wanting to be called cruel. I turned then. "No," I said. "You did what was easiest to defend." He looked away first. That was all the apology I was going to get that night. And for the first time, I did not try to turn it into more. Outside, the night air felt colder than it should have. Mia and I stood on the stone steps beneath strings of white lights while the wedding continued behind us in fragments. Music restarting too soon, voices lowering, someone laughing and stopping quickly when they remembered what had happened. Mia was still holding her phone. Her knuckles had gone pale around it. "Did I make it worse?" she asked. I turned to her. No child should have to ask that after telling the truth. "No," I said, "you made it real." She let out a breath that seemed too big for 17 years to hold. "I was scared," she said. "I know. I did not want everyone staring. I know that too." She looked back at the reception doors. "I thought you were going to let her say it." For a minute, I admitted, I almost did. Mia nodded like that did not disappoint her, like she understood the old habit better than I wanted her to. That was the part Beth never understood. I was not the only one she had trained to disappear. She had trained Mia too, one message at a time, one secret at a time, one "don't tell Dad" at a time, one story where the child had to understand too much and say too little because her mother wanted to look normal. The difference was that Mia had said no, not loudly, not all at once. She had said no by saving what she was told to delete. That was why the room changed. Not because the evidence was loud, because the child was finally louder than the lie. We walked to the car together. Behind us, Beth's wedding was still happening, but it no longer belonged to her in the same way. The guests could eat the cake. The band could play the last songs. The photographer could soften every image, but the room would not remember the night the way Beth wrote it. They would remember the toast. They would remember the laughter. They would remember the child walking to the microphone. And they would remember that the woman called a failure had been the one paying for everyone else's peace. My father texted me twice before midnight. The first message said I had gone too far. The second said he wanted to talk when I was calm. I did not answer either one. For years, calm had been the condition they attached to my right to be heard. Be calm, Claire. Be reasonable. Be supportive. Be careful. Be quiet. Be the person who can carry everything without embarrassing anyone who handed it to you. I was calm. That was the problem for them. Calm meant I was no longer negotiating with myself. Beth called the next morning. I let it go to voicemail. For the first time in my life, I did not feel guilty watching her name disappear from my screen. Mia came over that afternoon with a duffel bag and a look on her face I knew too well. I don't want to go back there today, she said. I opened the door wider. You don't have to. She stepped inside, looked at the small table by the window, and smiled in a way that almost broke me. My homework is still in the drawer, she said. Of course it is. She sat down and took out her laptop. No speech. No ceremony. No dramatic declaration. Just the ordinary return of a child to the place where she felt safe. That was when I understood the real ending. The wedding had been public. The humiliation had been public. The reversal had needed to be public because the lie had been given a microphone. But the repair was quiet. Pasta on the stove. A folder backed up to 3 places. A phone turned face down. A teenager doing homework while someone who loved her stayed within reach. 2 weeks later, Beth's husband postponed the honeymoon. A month later, several relatives who had laughed during the toast sent cautious messages saying they had not understood. I did not answer most of them. Understanding that arrives after proof is not useless, but it is not the same as courage. My father tried to frame the whole thing as a family disagreement that had become emotional in public. Mia corrected him before I had to. She wrote one sentence in the family group chat before leaving it. It became public when Mom made it public. No one replied. That silence felt different from the old kind. The old silence had been a lid. This silence was the sound of people learning they no longer controlled the story. I kept living. That sounds small unless you have spent years being useful instead of visible. I kept working. I kept paying only the bills that belonged to me. I kept my door open for Mia and closed to anyone who thought access to my help came without respect. Beth eventually sent an apology that sounded like a press statement. She said she had been overwhelmed, that weddings bring out unresolved family roles, that she regretted the way her words landed. I did not correct the language. I had learned that not every lie deserves my labor. Mia read it and rolled her eyes. She still thinks landing is the problem, she said. What do you think the problem was? I asked. She looked at me. That she aimed. I saved that sentence. Not as evidence, as proof that the child I had tried to protect had learned to name a wound without becoming one. That mattered more than Beth's apology, more than my father's shame, more than the room turning, because I did not raise Mia so she could rescue me. I raised her as much as anyone is allowed to raise another person's child without stealing the name, so she would know the difference between love and performance. At her graduation the following spring, Mia put 2 tickets in my hand. One said Beth, one said Claire. Then she took mine back and smiled. They printed it wrong, she said. The next day, she handed me a corrected ticket. It said, Claire Family. I kept it in the same folder where I kept the wedding audio, not because I needed proof anymore. Because some records do not exist to defend you. Some records exist to remind you that the truth survived. I was not the family failure. I was the person who stayed. I was the woman who paid for the quiet everybody enjoyed. I was the one who kept Mia safe while Beth practiced being admired. And I was the one who finally understood that being useful to people who erase you is not love. It is a job. That night, at Beth's wedding, I quit, and I never went back to work for them again. What would you have done in her place? Tell me in the comments where you think the line was crossed. If you believe no woman should have to stay quiet just to keep the peace, like this story and subscribe to the Snapped Bloodline. There's another story waiting for you.